I think we are we almost live? Yeah, no, we are totally live. We are happening. Welcome wherever you are. Um, this is Devin Galladay, the editor-in-chief of In the Know Traveler. And today we're going to talk about writing. We're going to talk about the hard parts of writing and the easy parts of writing. And I hope you've had a good week. Oh, and I even put in a poll here that if you see, I wanted to find out if any of you had a chance to check out your local CVB and see if you could make friends with them. And if you've applied any of the techniques, do respond to that. If you are here today, chime in, anytime you like. We have down in this, on this lower side here, we have a little message box that you can type in your questions. We're going to have a Q&A later, but if there is something that you're not understanding, it's confusing, you're a little lost, you have a relevant question, feel free to throw it out, and I'll do my very, very best to sort of answer all of your questions on the fly. So anyway, just to quickly talk about last week, I hope that you guys got everything that you needed. I did answer some questions on our Facebook page, so feel free to go there to check out responses. But basically, we're talking about reaching out to the tourism boards, the CVBs, the airlines, hotel chains, tour operators, tour givers, all kinds of people throughout the world who are promoting travel and tourism in some way, whether it be sort of a wide scale thing or a small thing. There are loads and loads of people who are all looking for a little bit of exposure and link backs to their site and all kind of fun things like that. We're going to talk about more of those kinds of SEO and social media operations a little bit towards the end of this. But for now, I wanted to tell you about my writing career, which didn't start as a writing career. It started out as a wood shop career. And this is like a no joke thing. This is like the real deal, because I know a lot of people are probably sitting at home, sitting back in your chair, wondering, wow, but I'm not a writer, or I don't see myself as a writer. And so I need to tell you, not only did I not see myself as a writer of anything, I was absolutely 100% positive that I was totally not a writer in any way. When I was in third grade, I was told quite literally by my third grade teacher, she said, you're never going to be a writer. You should take a lot of woodshop classes. Now, looking back, that's sort of like hilarious and a bit of a joke. But at the time, it was totally a miserable experience for me. I had... what I did was I took a lot of woodshop classes. I just kind of assumed, well, a writer is a certain type of a person. I'm not that kind of a person, so I took a lot of woodshop classes. And, one of the reasons why my wife married me is not because I've become a proficient writer, is that I'm a proficient guy who fixes things around the house. So I took those woodshop classes pretty seriously. And when I started in the Know Traveler, one of the hangups was that, well, but I'm not a writer. As a matter of fact, when I was freelancing writing, I was like, well, but I'm not a writer. I mean, I want to write. I hope to become proficient and better at it at some point down the road, but I'm totally not a writer. And so, long story short, I became a writer. I started in the Know Traveler. I didn't worry about it. I didn't take myself too seriously, because the main goal wasn't about me being a writer. My main goal was about me promoting travel and seeing the world for free, because I kind of figured out by then, well, if I just keep writing, I can keep taking trips, which is exactly what had manifested. So if you are not a writer, if you don't see yourself as a writer, that's fine, because there's lots of different kinds of styles of posts that we're going to talk about. If you want to be a writer, just write something. Don't worry about it. As a matter of fact, one of the questions that was posed to me a number of years ago that was really sort of like one of those little turning point questions, a little eureka moment that we have. I had been writing, and I had been selling articles, and I had been doing the things that writers do. And she had said to me, because I kept saying, oh, she should bring up writing. And I'd say, well, I'm not a writer. And oh, I have a request. Let me see who that is. Katie is raising her hand. Let's see. Can you type your question in, Katie? If you do, that would probably be helpful. That would be on the chat page, and I will do my very, very best to answer it. So I wasn't a writer. Matter of fact, probably for the first 7 or 8 years of me writing in the No Traveler and editing, I was in my head probably neither one of those things. I felt I was providing a service. Now, long story short, as a middle-aged guy, I went back and got my Master's in Fine Arts. Matter of fact, I got my BA and then I got my MFA in creative nonfiction. And I've gotten, over the last number of years, I've become a pretty good writer. So don't punish yourself if you're not a writer. If you are, just think of it as that you are a content creator. Hi, Lorraine. How are you? I hope everything is well. So again, just be nice to yourself. Do some writing. And we're going to talk about the specifics of that in a minute. But just understand that when I started in the No Traveler, I, without question, had 0 credentials. I absolutely was not a writer by anybody's stretch of the imagination, including my own, but I worked at it, and it was part of my passion. So the actual practice of writing was something that over the long haul for me proved fruitful, and my 3rd grade teacher an idiot. So I'm going to enjoy saying that one over and over again. So what's the usual turnaround? I'm not sure if I understand that question. If you could say more, Lorraine, that would be helpful. Oh, cool. Very cool, Jill. We have something very important in common. So how do you start? This isn't a writing course, so we're not going to delve into the intricacies of how to construct a sentence, how to be brilliant, or any of those other things. What I'm going to try and tell you to do is, under the belief system that you probably don't want to necessarily be a writer, you may want to be a blogger, you may want to just have fun with this, but you're ultimately looking for free trips. So I'm going to try to give you as much bang for your buck about travel as humanly possible, so that you can kind of get bylines and get some trips and help promote yourself in a way that is going to be useful, so you can see the world and tell the people around the world about your corner that you went and visited, because I think that's an important thing. And that was ultimately the goal of In the No Traveler, as well as my other sites that I have started. So if there was one tip I was going to give you that would probably be a crucial thing, would be tell the truth. That means find something that you love, something that you are passionate about, and write it down. It's no more complicated than that. Tell the truth of your experience. Talk about things that you enjoy to promote travel. If you decide that you're creating a blog that is a little bit more critical, then write about the things that you don't love. Find the things that are problematic. I mean, again, my ultimate goal is to promote travel, so I do look for the positive. Overall, I'm a glass half full kind of guy. So write about the things that you are compelled, that you're passionate about writing, and tell the truth. And when I say to tell the truth, I'm not saying the sky is blue. I'm not talking about sort of facts that we all agree on. I'm talking about writing your truth, no matter how that may play out. If you think everybody should go to Iraq to just have fun travel trips, do that, and do that unapologetically. Write that truth of why you think people should go to a place that many people choose to overlook for whatever reason, whether it be safety concerns or something else. Matter of fact, speaking of places like Iraq and Iran, places that we frequently overlook, the point is that there's incredible history there. There's incredible monuments there. There's incredible mosques and culture there. It may not be for everybody, but the point is that if that's what you're driven to do, then absolutely go for that in wild abandon. Okay, what's the usual response time in getting an answer back? If you're talking from a PR firm or a tourism board, there isn't a usual response time. It just really depends on who's answering the email and who's, what they have on their plate that week. Again, as I had mentioned last week, tourism people tend to be like the account managers that handle, and I mean like big accounts, are usually young women, somewhere between the ages of 22 and 25. And so they are young, they are overworked, they are probably underpaid. And it really just depends from week to week. I've had, times when I've reached out to people and they respond in 10 minutes. And I've had other times where I don't get responses at all for any one of 1,000 reasons. And I mean, like, I'm on a story deadline. Can you confirm X, Y, and Z for me as factual as you'd asked me to? And I get no response at all. And it's nothing personal. As a matter of fact, the people that didn't respond at all, I would end up seeing them later, 6 months later at some sort of an event with their apologies, like, oh my God, I was just under the deadline. So, just don't take it personally. So I would worry less about the response time and more about just being conscious of that these are the people that you're dealing with. Like if they're dealing with a tourism board of an entire nation, they're probably always under the gun and always buried underneath it. So big stuff. So tell the truth. Other things that I would talk about is always bring a camera, even if you're not a photographer. I wasn't a photographer either. Another story, my first trip to Japan, I had actually been assigned, my very first assignment, I went to Mexico. And the editor at the end of the trip said, hey, did you take any pictures of the pyramid? And I said, well, yeah, I'm in them because I was doing selfies, and this was years ago. And his response was, well, we'll crop you out. And so I ended up selling 4 or 5 pictures that day, and thinking to myself, why don't I just invest in a camera? A couple of years later, I ended up in Japan. And quite literally, there was like a guy with the vest with all the pockets and all the camera film and the 10 lenses. And that guy, and he was like, oh, this is Fujihara. He's like a guy who takes pictures for National Geographic. And what he would do is I started watching him on day 1 of the trip. And he would crouch, and I thought, he'd crouch down and he'd take a picture. And I just remember thinking I should just do whatever he does. Now, to be quite honest with you, I later found out that this is not kosher in the photography world. However, I didn't know anything. So I followed Fujihara around, and if he crouched down, if he went like this, I took the pictures, high angle. I just followed him and took the pictures that he took. And he never said anything, and he spoke no English. However, on day 4 of this trip to Japan, he literally let me see your camera. So he took my camera and he started looking at the pictures that I was taking, which were not framed well and probably out of focus and had a million problems with them. And he started showing me his comparison photos of what he was taking and what I was taking. And all of a sudden I learned all this incredible stuff. And because of him and other photographers and some photography books and actually just trying it out, I've become not only a pretty competent writer, but a pretty competent photographer as well. So if you aren't a writer or a photographer, don't worry about that. A broken clock is right twice a day anyway. So be kind to yourself, do the very, very best you can. Some other tips. Always have an introductory paragraph at the beginning talking about what you're going to talk about. Then in subsequent paragraphs, this is sort of like rule number 3, dig deep. Don't go after the most obvious thing that you're going to write about. I would go with the second or the third thing that really inspired you as being more interesting. Most of the things that you're going to think, your first thoughts, are going to be the things that everybody writes writes about. So you don't need to worry about that. Try to get a little bit deeper and come up with sort of like a style that is going to be useful to you moving forward. Always, certainly with travel writing, talk in pictures. So if you see a young girl standing in a room, don't write, "I see a girl standing in a room." Tell me what color dress or pants she had on. Tell me the color hat she had. Is she wriggling her nose? Is she blinking wildly? Is she flailing her hands in the air? All of those things bring a reader into the universe with you of what you were seeing. And the more you can do that, the more your audience is going to be intrigued by what it is that you're writing. So in diving into that notion, you also want to get into the real details. The more specific and the more of them, the better. Don't back away just because you felt like you've spent too much time on one idea or not. That's what re-editing is for. But get down all of the details, because sometimes the last detail that you write down is like, oh, that's the detail that sums up this entire great big picture, and you may not need to include the first 8 details. So write it out fully. I would always bring a steno pad, something that's sort of like a long little notebook that fit well into a back pocket, and you can write a lot on them. So always take a lot of detailed notes whenever possible, especially when you're traveling. I highly recommend outlining. That means, like, literally, here's what your topic sentence is. Here's sort of like your follow-up sentences that all become paragraphs later on, and then sort of like the re-emergence of your topic sentence as a rewritten form into your last sentence. And keep in mind, I'm just giving like a very tip of the iceberg in writing, or the iceberg. You know, we're just, because there's so much to good writing, we could be here for weeks and months. Always include specifications. These are great things to take notes of, i.e. that if you are ever going to a location that has, you know, open and close hours, make sure that you include those. If you stay at a hotel for free and you're writing about the hotel, talk about the details of the hotel. When was it built? Was it built by somebody really famous, a famous designer? How many rooms do they have? If they have more than one category, how many categories? In other words, is there the junior executive, the presidential suite, the empress, floor, whatever that is, make special notes of that. And always, always, always hit anything that has to do with a deadline, whether you are writing for yourself or someone else. Matter of fact, if you're writing for yourself, I would highly recommend that if you're writing articles for your blog, let's say, and you pick a specific day, Tuesday at noon, you are absolutely going to be posting an original article written by you, and make that time sacred that you're writing that article, because then you will get it done. Not only will that be useful for your own self, whether you're writing for your own blog, it's going to be incredibly useful and allow you to build credibility with editors. Because remember, we talked before that tourism boards and PR firms will send you on trips. Do you know who else will? People like me. Editors will send you on trips, because I get trips all the time that I just can't take, or I don't want to go on, but it might be a good story, or I don't have the time. And so I like having people that are reliable and dependable. And one of the ways I see that is that when somebody says that they're going to do something and they do it, that is sort of like a little feather in your cap. So make sure that you hit your word counts. If they tell you that 306 words is the maximum, then you don't write 307 words. That's it. Like if they say 300 words and they don't tell you like it has to be this, then you can do a few here, maybe 8 more on either side. But I would make sure that you are incredibly clear. I see if somebody else's hands way, let's see. Is that still Katie? Yeah, Katie, feel free to ask your question whenever you have a chance. So those are deadlines. And why are we worried about all of this stuff? Is because I want you to be reliable for editors. So how's the best way to find out what an editor wants from you? It's called the submission guidelines. I have them on In the Know Traveler. Pretty much every site you're going to find in every magazine is going to have some sort of a web page that tells you precisely what they want. Sometimes the submission guidelines are going to be really complex. They're going to be technical. If there's a certain photograph, it has to be done in a certain way, and they do not accept other variations of that. So what I highly recommend is before you submit anything to anybody, when you're building your street cred, is to read the submission guidelines and take them incredibly seriously. As a matter of fact, let me see if I can find mine for us right now. Yes. Okay. Here's something that I send out to almost everybody. Matter of fact, this is like an autoresponder to In the Know Traveler. Here are a few generic pointers I offer to anyone who is interested in writing for In the Know Traveler. Please write stories between 500 and 700 words. We also accept short blog posts, 150 to 250 words about one detail of your trip. Triple check spelling and grammar. We don't have a lot of time to edit, so the stories we publish are darn near finished. We tend to focus on first-person narratives that include something on culture or positive tourism, sustainable, eco, and what makes a destination unique. By the way, first person is when we talk about I voice. That means I did this, I experienced that. I enjoyed my trip to Seattle. We also avoid you and we voices. That means, well, even if Larry was there, I don't probably care about him. So when you write your story, you don't need to include Larry unless unless you happen to meet with the Dalai Lama or something. So avoid where it talks about we. I think, and this is sort of like my thing, is that I think that a travel story is a personal experience. And so I never publish stories that have you appearing at more than at once. I is the way to go. I want to read about something that you absolutely love and inspires others to travel. Be honest. Tell me as if I were your best friend, not what you think I want to hear or what you think a travel article should say. So what are the crucial points in that piece? It is 500 to 700 words. That means I receive almost every single day word counts that are 2,500 words. And they said, oh, I read your submission guidelines. Here's my 2,500 word article. As an editor, I'm not going to make the time to write back and say, oh, you missed our word count. Please rewrite it and send it to me. I mean, sometimes we'll do that, but for the most part, I just press delete because I have other articles and stories to get to. So that's one. Two, first person voice. I did this, I did that. And part three is about something that you loved while traveling. So you would be amazed with these 3 points, the amount of articles that I don't get that don't look at that at all, even if they claim that they read them. So understand that this is important. It's not only just that I'm looking to make some rules, I'm looking for somebody who I can depend upon and rely upon in the future. So keep in mind, that's what, submission guidelines are basically sort of like an editor's vision of what the content and the story will embody. In other words, if you don't know In the Know Traveler and you go visit our site and you read one of our stories, you're going to get shorter stories, you're going to get personal experience. And it's probably going to be about something that they absolutely loved. And all of those things should ring true, things that will inspire you to take more trips. So how would you find people who are going to publish your work? Honestly, I would go to Google and type in travel magazine or travel blog, or those two would probably just cover about everything. And the ones that are going to be the top 3 or 4 on Google are probably going to be wildly popular, and you can expect to get a ton of competition. But if you get 3 or 4 pages into Google on those keywords, you're going to probably find a much more receptive audience. And keep in mind, In the Know Traveler is not National Geographic. We're not a far magazine. So we're not a huge publication, and I get submissions every single day. As a matter of fact, today I think I got like 5. So we get a fair amount of submissions that come in on a very, very regular basis. So just understand that when you follow the rules, you're putting yourself already probably in the top 10 or 15% of people who are not looking at submission guidelines. So once you find these people, or let's say you find a publication that seems to fit what you are looking to accomplish, let me get back on this page again. What I recommend that you do is find the contact information, which is somewhere probably in the footer of the page, in other words, all the way at the bottom, or perhaps in the top where it might say submit here or submission guidelines or something to that effect. So follow those rules. Once you send them out a letter, you will send them out what's called as a query. Unless it says, just send me your story. Like In the Know Traveler, you just send me your story. Do what I asked you to do, send me your story as is, we're gold, anywhere around the world. Others are much more specific to how they want things. But the query letter is generally just a summary of what the editor wants to see in order to make their decision. Sometimes it's a story, maybe sometimes it is a paragraph. Read you the first line and the first paragraph of a query where it's sold, which it was literally, Bali is pretty great. Here are a few story ideas that might be a good fit. I wrote several, but I'm just going to give you one. Getting healthy in Bali. Ubud is a land of culture and a lot of humidity. So there is also a burgeoning food industry. Surprisingly or not, there are tons of organic and healthy choice restaurants in abundance that feature traditional Balinese fare as well as more contemporary veggie-based menus familiar to American appetites. This article will include 5 to 7 of the better restaurants, juice bars, and cafes in Ubud and neighbor Penistan, about a 10-minute walk from downtown Ubud. And I also put at the very bottom below all of these, any of these above articles can easily go from 400 to 600 words, which is typically what they publish. So that one tends to be a little bit more informal because I've written 70 articles for that magazine. But by the way, that what I just told you sold. It's a synopsis of what the editor can expect to get from me in the future. So a query letter is just sort of like a short, it can be bullet points, but I think you're better off writing a paragraph to showcase that you are capable of putting periods and commas in a story. So when you're querying, what I highly recommend that you do is pick 3 or 4 places, off with the same story, by the way, 3 or 4 places that will what you think would probably be easier to get published in, and one, like, write a far magazine, write, the Huffington Post, write bigger publications where there's a lot more competition, because you never know. It's as simple as that. Okay, so let's get into creating content. Focus on your value. That means the stuff that we talked about last week. If you have a particular angle that you want to focus on, then do that. Like, I tend to write about destinations. I do a lot of roundup articles. I'll explain what that is in a little bit. And tell the story that you want to tell. So be enthusiastic. Be kind to yourself. You're not going to get it right. And matter of fact, one of the very first assignments I ever got, matter of fact, I think it might have been the first one, where I talked my way into getting an assignment. And once the editor said yes, my first reaction was to backpedal as quickly as possible because I was terrified. I was terrified of turning in an article and having them say, well, this is terrible and you're a moron and a complete failure. And so I started backpedaling, like, oh, well, you really don't want a story about me. I mean, I really don't know what the heck I'm talking about. And the editor said something to me, which I want you to take. I want you to take it as a pearl of wisdom and put it in your pocket. And that is, your writing is none of your business unless you're the editor. Then you just have to spruce it up. As this editor told me, he said, if I don't like your writing, I'll fix it. That's my job. So when you turn in a story from an assignment, you do the very best you can, and then you turn in your story. And if there's something wrong, the editor will either, I need you to fix it and do something, or they will do it themselves. Sometimes they might even rewrite your entire article to a place that you've never even heard of before. So don't worry about it. You're ultimately there to develop relationships, so do the best that you can. Two things that I want you to focus on in the articles that you create are either going to be about your adventure story, which is going to be in the first person. I did this, I did that, I climbed a mountain, I sang a song when I reached the peak. That's first person voice, or third person voice. Third person is going to be much more instructional. It's something that you would see in a Let's Go guide. And it might be, on the corner there is a shoe shine person, and directly across from that is a store where you're going to buy the greatest backpack that you've ever seen. Here's the address, and here's the opening and closing times. So it's going to be a little bit more formal in tone, and it is going to be a little bit more instructional in its style. So either form, I would personally argue that when you're writing a personal story, it's a little bit more work because you're more emotionally invested in what you're going to be delivering to your audience. I would also say it's much more satisfying once you have actually promoted your story. So the other thing I was going to say is that a lot of people want to write in second person voice. That means you did this, you did that, and they kind of want to paint a picture for the writer. More often than not, that kind of story focus. As a matter of fact, I write a lot about this in the Essential Travel Writer's Guide. It's actually sort of off-putting because the writer doesn't actually know how I think and feel, and second person voice tends to do that. I personally think there's a writer named Lori Moore who is sort of like literature. She is like a smarty, super smarty, excellent writer. And she's like the only person I know on the planet who can pull off second person voice in a beautiful, thought-provoking, wonderful way. And no, she does not write travel articles. So I would avoid using you at all costs. Also, if you're dealing with an old school editor, it's a definite no-no, but you can get away with it if you absolutely must in your own personal blogs. So we have first person, third person. Those are sort of your main choices in terms of point of view, otherwise known as POV. The third person tends to have, or pardon me, the first person voice tends to have a little bit more impact because it's a little bit more engaging and you have more ability to put somebody in the room. However, third person has a unique thing that I want you to consider. It is the ability to write evergreen. In other words, if you were to, let's say, write about the top places to visit in Sri Lanka, and let's say natural wonders, a great museum, the fabulous castle, or other fantastic sites in Sri Lanka, those are probably not going to change dramatically from year to year. So if you were to write 7 fantastic things to do in Sri Lanka, you can repackage that article over and over, or sell it or resell it over and over and over again, unless you give away the rights to the article to, let's say, and maybe if you write for a National Geographic, they may say, well, the second you submit this article to us, we own the rights to that story. Sometimes they do that. It's becoming less and less common, especially with the internet. People tend to retain their rights. So I'm sure there's probably some people sitting around going, wow, writing is a lot of work. Is there a way that I can cheat? Well, one of the ways that I just described is that you can use evergreen articles as long as you're sort of like doing the legal thing. But there are people who do something called what the heck is it called? Oh, article spinning. Article spinning is a technique where basically they take the first paragraph and they change a couple lines. They then take the, let's say if it's the seven fantastic places in Sri Lanka, they may take those 7 things and put them in a different order. And then they will take that final closing paragraph and they may do the exact thing that we talked about, which is they may rewrite it a tiny, tiny bit. They even have computer programs who do this. I'm going to be completely frank with you. Like, it's a terrible, horrible idea. I think it just is bad. It's kind of a bad karma thing because you're protecting an article when you're sort of not. You're just kind of ripping off yourself and churning it around, and it tends to not work out well the more you churn it. Like, the first pass, you probably gave your best effort. The following passes, you probably didn't. You know, to me, article spinning is almost like plagiarizing. So I would avoid it at all costs, because some people will actually take existing articles and apply the same techniques to their articles and hope they can get away with it. I do large scale searches to find out matching articles. So if somebody put in sort of like a matching, you know, like 2 identical paragraphs, I'll catch it and I'll just delete them and I'll put them on a do not contact list. And I know a lot of editors in this business who do the same thing, because we want original contact. It doesn't serve us or you in the long run at all by sort of manufacturing rather than writing content. Okay, so I want to give you some ideas on easier, like writing your own personal story. If you write like a 2,500 word article, you'll be working on it for a while to make it good. So I wouldn't always focus on the 2,500 word article. There are lots of other kinds of articles that you can do fast and easy. I will accept them. Lots of other blogs will, as long as it's pretty good content and it's clean and it serves a purpose and it's providing value to the reader. So these are more, and this is going to be part of the template series that I'm going to send out to you, I believe, on Monday. But I want you to kind of allow the stuff that we're talking about today to kind of like, you get to absorb it and soak it in. First off, how are we doing for this first part? Is everybody doing okay? I don't know who's here. I've got a handful of people who have made some comments. Is there some other folks that have some comments, or can we move forward? Or questions? Any questions or comments? Or just say hello. Tell me that you're here and that everything is fine. Okay, I think we'll just continue. So the first one is an interview. When you conduct an interview, and by the way, you can do these on video, you can do them on audio, and you can do them sort of on a live standpoint. Oh, hello, Linda LD. Good to see you. Thank you for being here. So you can you can do an interview. What I suggest is you do like quite literally 3 or 5 short questions on something that your interviewee is very, very familiar with. If you do it on video, it's easy. They're just going to talk. You're going to download the video and upload it and perhaps write an introductory paragraph on that. But if you are doing sort of a written interview, very often the person that you are interviewing will just write out their responses, like, here's my questions. They may respond it. Hey, Steve, you're probably not going to see any because I don't think it's going to sort of like, I think it's just going to start you off wherever it is that you landed. But good to see you. I'm glad that you're here. So we're talking about interviews. And so we're going to ask, let's say, 3 to 5 questions. Sometimes the interviewee will write down the responses, and literally you're just going to cut and paste your questions in and their response. If you can't get them to write in the questions, then you may have to transcribe. There are apps that you can use for that, or you can use a company like Rev. Matter of fact, I'll include it here. Rev.com does transcription services for $1 a minute. They're pretty reliable. I've been pretty happy with them overall. So So that's one way to do it. There's also something called, and this is sort of the second one, we'll call it the group interview. And that's basically where you pose the same question to 3 to 5 people. This is even much easier because more often than not, people will likely give you their response rather than a video or audio interview. They will give you their directly right on the email. So that becomes purely like, here's the question, here is their response. And what I would tend to do is like, here's the question. I would put a picture of your person, their response in quotation. I would give a link to their website, and I would do that on 3 different times. And then maybe you might have like a follow-up a response from yourself or an opening paragraph. Either way, it's super easy, super fast. I would also use story quotes as an example. Let's say there is something special that is going on around the world. Let's say there has been a new hotel opening. Oh, my cat just showed up, so she's going to be a little bit noisy, but she's going to be sitting here with us now. So the quotes are, as an example, let's say when something happens around the world, let's say there is a new art opening and people are writing about a specific hashtag. Let's say they're doing something special at the Grand Canyon, and a handful of those people have gone to the Grand Canyon, and you search that hashtag. That means it's literally the # and whatever special phrase or word that is on the back of that. On Twitter, what you will end up seeing is a list of quotations. You can literally embed all of those quotations. I recommend somewhere between 6 and 10 of them. Embed those quotations in your story and then say, hey, this is what's going on in the Grand Canyon. You may want to give a few extra lines, but it will give people sort of like an instantaneous feel of what's happening. That will require you, things like that will require you to sort of like pay attention to what's trending online. And you can do that through a Google announcement where literally you type into Google, here's what I'm looking for, and Google will keep recycling it, will give you notifications when particular topics become trending. This is particularly ideal if you have sort of, let's say, an entire country that you are focusing on. So you can also do what I like to call a reaction story. And a reaction story is literally your personal reaction to somebody else's content. i.e., as an example, if you are, let's say, watching videos about Paris and somebody puts on a great Paris video or a terrible Paris video, I would take that link, I would put it in your site, and I would quite literally react to it. Here's what I like. Here's why I think it's relevant. Here is why I think you should watch this. It's almost like a Facebook post. Now, keep in mind, all of these examples that I'm giving you are fast and easy. I don't personally love them, but I do use them from time to time. And if you are a content creator, like on your own blog, they are really fast and really easy. And as long as you choose sort of like great Twitter quotes or a great YouTube video, then you're sort of like in a good position. So that's a reaction video. A list story is quite literally a very shortened version of a roundup. As a matter of fact, before we get into the list, let's talk about the roundup for a second. It's one of my favorite kinds of stories. And a roundup would be, let's say, 10 great restaurants in Shanghai. And it just could be 10 restaurants that you enjoyed while you were visiting China. Or, pardon me, Shanghai. So you would like, here's the place, here's the location, and here's why I liked it. And it's just a sentence or two for each. I would give 6 to 10 variations on each. And by the way, all of this is going to be coming to you on Monday, or maybe Sunday. I'll try to get it to you as soon as possible. That will give you this entire list of details and information. So that would be a roundup story. A list story would probably include a longer list, less specific details, but it would include a longer list. And it might be 35 ways to have a fantastic time in Paris or New York. Obviously, the longer the list, the better. You will find if you do Google searches, and we're going to discuss this in a minute, is that the longer the list, the more likely you're going to rank higher. The more link backs to the sites of things that you promote are also going to promote you well in Google as well. So these are important things to consider. The picture galleries, remember, you don't have to be a fantastic photographer to take a picture, but if you do go on a trip, you're probably going to want to write down just a sentence or two of what you loved about each photo and why it's going to be relevant to your author. It could literally be one picture where you write a paragraph. It could be 6 or 9 pictures of places that you love with just a caption on each, and either one are great. I would also consider using a content aggregator. A content aggregation is basically when, let's say, your subject is Latvia, and you have found 6 great articles about Latvia, and what you may want to do is literally cut and paste. Now, of course, I would always recommend you give credit to the author. You put it in a quote box, and you link back to their website with specific information about whatever it is that you want to promote within Latvia. And so it's less of an authored by, but it's more of a compiled by. If you want, you can always sort of write a short reaction of why you've included this information in the box below their quotation. But always make sure that you have a link back to the author. Otherwise, then you're kind of stealing it without their permission. I personally would go a step further and actually say, hey, I would love to comment on this quote of yours on my website. I'm linking back to you. 98% of the time, they are happy to receive the exposure. So there's going to be, so that's a whole long list of, I think we've got at least 8 potential news stories that you can rewrite or create really quickly and easily. I'm assuming that you could probably write most of them within a half an hour once you get good at it. I mean, we're talking about 10 or 15 minutes. Okay. It's a lot of information. I found myself talking really, really fast. I want to talk about 2 final things that will make you look great to editors and to tourism boards, and that is to have a rough understanding of social media marketing as well as search engine optimization. So let me talk first about search engine optimization. And by the way, I am certified with Digital Marketer, which is a company that puts out a number of courses that are all about specific online things. You know, when I was telling you earlier that, like, I'm not a writer, but I've become one, and I'm not a photographer, but I've become one. I'm not a tech guy, but I've become one. So when I talk about SEO, which is the more common acronym that you're going to find, search engine optimization, you're going to find that it's all about how do you rank in Google? How do you show up in search results? This is highly, highly technical stuff. I don't want to get into the super technical things, but there's a couple ideas that I want you to think about. When you're writing your article, think of it in terms of what would show up in a search query, i.e., if you were to type something in to Google, what would you want to show up? So, or what would you think might show up if you're writing an article? So that means, let's say you're doing a roundup about Nairobi. You would, let's say, write, like, here's the best things to do in Nairobi. Here's best date night in Nairobi. And so you've got your movie theater, and you've got a mall, and you've got your soda shop, and you've got these several things. So you would probably want to think things to do in Nairobi would probably be a reasonable search, or date night on a date in Nairobi would be probably your perfect keyword search. What you would probably want to do is go into something, and again, I'm going to include this in the summary notes, but there is something called Google Keyword Planner. And what you're ultimately looking to do is find different levels of competition. So let me get really specific with you. on one end, you are going to have the most searched terms. The most searched terms are going to be, let's say, if you want to buy a radio, it's quite literally going to be radio. Somebody types in radio, there's going to be a billion things that come up that all refer to a radio. However, if I say AM, FM, clock, weatherproof radio, that is going to eliminate from this high, long list of radio things. It's going to bring it way, way down to probably only a handful of very, very specific radios. What you want to do in your helpfulness is focus on being as specific as possible when you think of what might somebody do to, or what series of words might somebody type in order to find your story. So the more specific you are in this keyword search, and again, you don't have to memorize all this. The important thing to come away from is that when you're thinking about the story that you're creating, think about going into writing the story with what would somebody be looking for in order to find the story and for this story to be the most useful thing as possible. So if it is date night in Nairobi, you might want to even think a more specific thing. I want to go to the best movie theater on a date in Nairobi. So the more specific, the more narrowed focus you can get, the more likely it's going to be really useful to the person who's going to be finding that story. And it is also going to be important to the editor. So what I would suggest that you do as part of any query that you submit or any article that you ultimately post is be mindful of the potential keyword search that you are going to be offering to somebody else, that somebody else somewhere else in the world is going to be searching out to find this specific story. It may sound like, well, but I'm cutting down my audience. Actually, what you're doing is you're activating the people who are going to be finding you. In other words, they're going to stay on your page longer. They're much more likely to click through to other stories because they've found this story to be so useful and specific to their particular needs. This is also going to be incredibly important for editors and bloggers. So if you get your story online, this way they can find you incredibly easily. Really useful stuff. And by the way, the term is called long tail keywords. That's, again, it's an industry thing. If you want to find out more about it, there's loads of articles about how to best do long tail keywords. But again, as long as you go into the story mindful of who specifically your audience is, the better for you. Also understand that 20% of all searches, this is still true today, right now, 20% of all searches on Google have never been searched before. So my guess is if you are looking for, drive-in movie theater for date night in Nairobi, you might be the first person. Something's going to come up, but you may be the very, very first person to ask for that request. So you want to be focusing on the potential of future stories as well, because sometimes one story on date night in Nairobi may not be enough. You want to make sure that you have something that is going to put yourself at the top in its usefulness. Anyway, how are we guys doing? Was that confusing enough for you, or did you get some basic ideas on how to understand search engine optimization? And by the way, let editors know that you have query, that you have thought about it, because that if you make sure that they understand that you are writing to a particular storyline, to a particular concept and idea. Matter of fact, this is a perfect opportunity to say, hey, I'm writing a story about X. I would love to know what kind of search query or keywords are part of yours so I can help unite the story that I'm creating and the kind of keyword searches that you do well with on your site. I guarantee you 100%, like Major League, they will absolutely love you, especially if the story is useful and offers value. So finally, Social media. Social media is Facebook likes, it's Twitter shares, it is posting a link on LinkedIn or Pinterest or StumbleUpon or a slew of others that are all around the world. If you haven't done so yet, I would suggest that you at least have access to an account for all of the major social medias. That's Instagram, Pinterest, LinkedIn, Google+. If you don't want to do it, don't worry about it. Remember, these are all extra credit things. Then what I would highly recommend that you do is focus on developing one of them. You don't have to be a Facebook expert. If you already have a lot of friends on Facebook, that might be a good place to start. If you already have a Facebook fan page, kudos. We have a number of them. I have a number of them. So I would pick one and then just try to promote it. Like get friends, get people to sign up, whether it's a newsletter, whether you're actively developing a list. Pick one thing and do a little bit every day so you can develop your audience. And this is going to be particularly important if you are writing for yourself. If you're creating content for yourself and you plan on doing it in a consistent way, you're going to want to make sure that you have all that information at the ready. So why is important? Well, the social media is that editors are going to want to know, they may not ask because a lot of them are not tech savvy, but if you develop a list, if you develop a lot of Facebook fans, if you develop a lot of people on LinkedIn, let them know about it. Because what that means is when your story becomes live, you would love to generate traffic for their site, especially if they're a smaller blog and you're just getting your feet wet and getting started. It will, A, bring more attention to your particular story, but it will also give the site that you've written for a boost. Like, I know exactly what my numbers are, and I know what's important about those numbers, and I know if there's a writer who is promoting their story with any activity at all, I know. And it is like, it's exciting that I don't have to do all the work in promoting a particular story. It's incredibly useful. So let them know that you have a fan base. Let them know that you know how to use social media. Let them know that you are focusing on it. And by the way, so getting back to our Facebook page, the Facebook page that we are developing, our tribe right now, we've got like, I think there's a handful of people who have not signed up. If you're one of them, just go sign up. It'll take a minute. But what you can do is, here is your network of people who like I highly recommend that you do this, get together and say, okay, we'll promote each other's content. We'll leave a comment on each other's pages or our sites, and we'll help create dialogue and motion, because social media is an incredibly powerful force. If you had a group of 50 people that were all promoting your web link on their Facebook pages, and you were doing this for them and leaving a comment and doing things like to you, because I've done it, your site will soar. It will start creating what's called organic traffic. That means Google recognizes that there's comments and a lot of likes, and it starts giving it a boost in their ranking. The higher the ranking, the more eyeballs are going to be on your page. So it's sort of a success begets success. It's also much more likely that somebody will leave a comment on a page that already has comments. So really good thing. I don't do it as much as I used to. I need to. I've just gotten way too busy. But I highly, highly recommend it. It will be something that will drive traffic to your site. So here's the other thing that's important about social media. I want you to start thinking in terms, and this is like really, really high-end, great stuff, is that start thinking in terms of when you write an article, not only are you writing it for the benefit of the travel industry or a specific editor, you can also create social media content that will help include parallel industries. What does that mean? I think it's a term that I actually made up, but what it means is, let's say I am backpacking, wearing high tops in the Andes. So That's a travel story. But it also means that I can include shoe companies and backpacks to my list. So what that means is I can quite literally say as value, say, hey, I'm going to be doing some sort of a roundup on shoe apparel and backpacks. You probably get some free shoes and backpacks out of the deal. But more importantly, when you start writing to the people in social media, including the hashtag, as an example, backpacking, because travel and backpacking don't necessarily meet, but they do have some crossover. And it's that crossover you want to create to get more clients or attract more people to get more eyeballs onto your story. Again, imperative. And more importantly, if you start promoting, let's say, a specific backpack, let's say you have your own backpack and you've been using it for years and you like it and you're using it for a particular story, you take a picture of it, I would absolutely go to that backpack manufacturer and say, I've had this backpack for 15 years and here's the story about it. I guarantee you that backpack manufacturer is going to then start promoting your story. So it's as simple as doing a quick Google search or searching on Twitter to find the actual apparel company or whatever parallel company that you might be able to fit into any article that you write. And what's great about it, one of the things that I did, which is like, it's a super deluxe secret that I think you're going to love, is that what I started doing is when I started developing relationships, not just in travel, but into parallel industries. Like as an example, I developed a great relationship with Lonely Planet, as well with Moon Guides. I still get their stuff showing up in the mail all the time. But what I would do is I literally went to them and said, hey, listen, I would love to do a giveaway. That means you guys send a book or a set of books or something, whatever they're willing to give, to a lucky winner who signs up to your newsletter. So that means you give Lonely Planet free advertising. You give a sign up to a link, or it might be to your Facebook fan page, or it might be to your Twitter account, and you're going to pick one of the recent signups and they're going to win a backpack or shoes or a set of books or a map or anything that you can kind of dream up. And it might be great high top shoes or hiking or, $300 special professional, hiking shoes. The point is that you can go in a whole lot of different directions, which will not only, you'll still be able to keep your niche, but you'll start to be able to develop a more diverse fan base that will be into what you're doing. So I would absolutely include all of this stuff. These are just sort of like, again, social media is a very, very wide field of things that you can do in order to use it. Matter of fact, when we were talking earlier about, what was that idea? I lost my train of thought. I hate when that happens. But just understand that you can, on social media, attract new users by utilizing different focuses. And that might be, even if you have no Twitter followers, when you put a hashtag travel or weddings, because I've done it, you will find people who will retweet your stuff to their audiences and their lists. And little by little, those people start becoming your people. And that's ultimately what you're going to want to do to garner more trips and more free travel and have more leverage to your value. It's one thing to say, I write travel articles. It's another thing to say, I have 10,000 followers and I write travel articles. These are things that that editors, publishers, tourism pros, and PR people all love, and I want you to work it all. So this week's challenge, I would like you guys to write 3 contacts, and I want you, if you were planning on doing this, like I said, I'm promising I'm going to publish one of your stories on In the Know Traveler. So that means I need you to send me a query letter. Matter of fact, I think you should do it on the Facebook page, but you can write me personally through DG at inthenowtraveler.com. So write me there. And so one special announcement, we're going to do a Q&A. I don't know if you have any questions, start writing them down, but I'm going to tell you about my special announcement which is this. I had done a series of interviews years ago, and then the computer died. And the series of interviews was quite literally to a magazine editor, what is it that you're looking for in a writer? What do you look forward to in somebody that you send on a trip? I went to top PR firms asking them the same question, the same thing with tourism boards. And the computer died, and I thought I had lost all that content. Literally 2 days ago, I was looking on a backup drive, and I found all the content. Everything is, a matter of fact, not only is it the video interviews, it's also the transcriptions of them. So I'm going to put all of this together for you in a special ebook. You're going to love it. So if you don't take my word for it, you can double check with magazine, PR, and tourism folks. I think you're totally going to love it. I'm going to get it ready for you probably by... I'm going to try and do it next week. That's my hopeful thing. And if I can't, then I'm going to definitely have it by our big Q&A. Anyway, I'm not seeing any major questions, so I'm assuming you guys are good this week. I know it was a lot of information. Know that you've got your week 2 summary coming up. It's going to be really easy. You're going to love it. And I am so excited. Do let me know. Do let me know your wins. Do let me know that you're writing your local CVBs and reaching out to other people. Let me know how your swipe files, your templates are going from last week, and reach out to me anytime at all on our Facebook page, and you guys have the links. And I'm so looking forward to next week, because we're going to get really specific to some of the incredible details that will help you get asked back time and time again on trips. So I look forward to having that time with you guys. Thank you so much for have a great time and happy travels. Thanks, everybody.